Hugh Torance House and Store is an historic building in Huntersville, North Carolina. If you've ever visited the area, you may have seen many old houses, but this one stands apart as being one of the oldest stores in the state. It's easy to identify standing next to another old house made mostly of brick with large columns out front, whose story is related, by the way. Today we are meeting up with my friend Sarah Sue Hardinger, local historian and author, to tour the house and learn more about the people who once lived there. Thanks for coming along on another episode of Hometown Chronicles USA.
Welcome, Hometown Chronicles USA, to the Hugh Torance House and Store, the oldest standing store continually in North Carolina. This building was acquired by the Torance family in 1779, but it didn't become a store and open in front of the store until 1805. Up until then, these people were traveling salesmen. They went around from Salisbury clear down to Norton, South Carolina, selling their goods on horse and muleback. After the son grew up to be old enough, he wanted to have a normal store like his uncle had had up in Salisbury. So in 1805, they split the original house, which was 600 square feet, into 300 square feet of a parlor and 300 square feet of a floor. The son was sent to Philadelphia with the equivalent of $300,000 to stock the store for the next several years. And while he was gone, his father built a whole front end on the house that dates to 1805 so that he could then get married 3 years later and start to raise a family of 13 children.
And our front end's on the other side. So right now, we're standing in the store.
Right.
Correct.
But I have to interject real quick. You said, so I'm thinking today when I go to the grocery store, we're talking $600 for maybe 3 weeks. You're telling me $300,000 for, you said 300 or 3,000?
$300,000.
$300,000 for 3 years.
For the first several years of the store. They wanted to stock it for years.
Wow. And I wonder what would that be in today's money?
That's what I mean, today's money.
Oh, okay. Got you. So the 300 then.
It was 4,000 English pounds.
Okay. Times have changed.
4,000 English pounds, stocked a store
Yeah.
for 3 years. So it wasn't just for their own use, it was to sell the whole community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
As far as we can tell, this is the way it was organized. And the way that we know that is if you look around the edge, there's wainscoting. And the wainscoting ends right there.
All right.
So there'd be no reason for it to end there unless it was something to interrupt it. So we figured there must have been some sort of a counter that interrupted it. That's why we put the counter here. Now, we doubt that the shelves would have been against the back wall. That doesn't give you much space. Other old stores I've seen have them vertical to the back wall, like a library, so to speak. And that gives you a lot more storage space. Also, if you look up, you can see occasionally some holes where something has been mounted up there. We think there were probably racks hanging down from the ceiling where larger things were stored.
Oh, wow. So you think they would have come horizontally across the middle of the room, basically, and then maybe a shop store right here?
Probably barrels and things, objects that were large that would be out there, and inevitably someplace for people to sit, because this was also a gathering space.
Yeah.
Really?
It's the only public space within miles that people could come and gather. We always had the newspapers that were printed that would come here eventually, and we'd hold them up. Probably operated partly as a post office for people to drop things off. And in a way, it kind of worked as a bank, because this was one place where hard money might come into the place. And if you needed hard money to pay your taxes, you might be able to bring goods here and get hard money back so you could go pay your taxes.
And I see that there's a ledger that's here.
Yes.
That identifies individuals who obviously have made purchases. Can you kind of give us an idea of what are some of the things that were purchased and sold and those types of things? I see a cutting knife here.
These are Major John Davidson's, the man that owned Royal Hill.
Okay.
And he would come every year, and this was the year's worth of buying and selling here. Another year's worth of buying and selling. It was not done exchange and exchange, like you didn't come in with money and buy something and walk out. You came in and a ledger was kept of what you brought into trade and what you took out in trade. And at the end of the year, it was leveled out, added up, and either Torance owed you money or you owed Torance money. And in the fall, when you might actually have some money, is when you settled up.
So kind of equivalent to like a credit system to a certain degree.
Call it bartering.
Bartering, yeah.
The barter system is what it was. And they would buy the hard things that they needed, like sundries. This kind of covers everything. That means like ribbons and doodads and things like that. As you say, we have on here certain things like that cutting iron and, what does it say, a pair of, I can't always read the writing, honestly. a pair of boots.
Yeah.
So things that you wouldn't make yourself. It's all things that you would not normally make yourself, or want better quality than you have made here. Okay. Especially for somebody like Major Davidson, might want some better quality things.
So I'm curious, was there ever any duels that took place you didn't settle your debts at the end of the year? Like, talk to me.
Well, Mr. Torrance was not. James Torrance, however, was a justice of the peace.
Okay.
And so were a good many of his friends. So if you didn't settle up,
not the guy
you
you
were
want to
already
go to
in
duel
court.
with.
Yeah, most definitely. And as it relates to, like, I'm looking at the store now, and obviously there's a road that's right out here. This is Gilead.
Yes, it has been there a long time.
And so where would be the front of the store, and is there like a wagon trail? Like, can you give us that breakdown?
Yeah.
And was this an indigenous trading path at one point in time as
Yes.
well? Okay.
Yes, actually, the road that is Concord Road to Huntersville, and then across this way was a natural path.
Okay.
That was a path, but there's another path that you drive in on. When you drive in the driveway here, you're kind of on harder ground.
Yeah.
That harder ground wraps around the house and goes into the backwoods back here and up onto a rise that ends up at McDowell Creek.
Okay.
That might well have been the way they got to the creek then instead of over here, because it's a much farther distance to the creek over here. There actually has to be a bridge over. You guys cross the bridge of McDowell Creek to get to here. But back here, it dead ends at McDowell Creek. When they get the whole walking trail done, you might be able to see where that ends. I'm not sure. So we think maybe that you came in the side, what is now the side back door of the 600 square foot house to enter this house, rather than the front door or this door.
That was to enter the house, but this clearly is the only entrance to the store.
This was the
that we
entrance
know of,
to
right?
this part of the building. It had always that door. So it's that old building had two doors, one each direction.
Cool.
So would you identify this as being kind of like the introduction to like official commerce in this specific area outside of, the bartering that may happen in private property? So this would be ground zero for that.
Yeah, it would be. Now, almost every landowner had some little industry going on. Maybe they had somebody who was a good blacksmith or a good boot builder or a good this or a good that. And so they do a little trading at their own plantation. But as far as a central place to come, this was definitely the beginning of it.
So what's some of the stuff that we have back here, if you don't mind?
Well, that going to Philadelphia and spending all that money,
tell us what.
we have the list of what he got.
That's right.
Okay.
We have the entire inventory of what he bought on that trip to Philadelphia.
All right, let's talk
And
about
so starting in COVID and for the years afterwards, we've tried really hard to get an example of everything that he bought. And we're doing pretty well. So we got a lot of the glassware that's on the list, and a lot of the medicine bottles are represented by medicine that he brought. The silver is true. He brought a little bit of silver and pewter and copper things for the more well-to-do people to buy here. He bought, he arranged to have sugar and coffee brought here. The flour was milled locally, but the coffee and the sugar and the tea he had sent in and arranged to have that done on a regular basis. He did bring some eyeglasses with him, which there's some over there. Ink he brought. There's a little bit of luggage on the list so that people could have a portmanteau. Wine. The wine comes in the big bottles. It didn't come in wine bottles. It came in these great big bottles, and then it was poured out into other wine.
To make sure you got the job done, right?
Something like that, I guess. They did import blankets because it takes a very big loom to make a blanket, unless you're going to piece it. And so they brought blankets. They bought a lot of fabric. Lace and doodads and ribbons came with him. Chamber pots. Got to have those.
Is that what those are?
Those are chamber pots.
Pretty fancy.
These are interesting because one actually has a liner in it. It's rare to see the liner still in it.
Oh my.
Then that comes out and you empty the chamber pot.
Yeah. And that's not original, is it?
Well, it's 18th century.
So
No, I think this is probably 19th century. But
So
this
as a
one,
historic
this
piece.
one's this one's probably American. We know this one's English.
Okay. Because you go to some places and they have,
Reproductions,
replicas of
yeah.
them,
I'm just thinking
Things to
that's a
make
small
candles.
It's a small target. Well, I mean, just imagine how the wives are. You're like, don't piss on the pot, right?
And that's where that came from.
Target. Yeah.
That's why it's called a pot, friends. Irons for ironing clothes. This is for making flax. You beat the flax against these huge combs. They're hard to make locally. The weights and measures that he would need. Thread would come that way. All of the iron pieces that would make up the tools that you would need, like some of these things are really heavy. I don't even know what all these things go to. That's probably part of a latch of some kind. Where's my plowshare? Here, this is a plowshare. You ever see a plowshare? That's what goes onto something and into the ground to turn the ground to dig a ditch. So you would get these brought in.
Like a blade
They would
or
just bring the
something.
metal parts though, and then whatever wood had to be done would be carved locally.
So once that initial stock of $300,000 was sold from Philadelphia, I'm assuming by that point he was rolling in the dough enough that he could buy supplies from locally, or did they continue importing it?
Local things were always done by barter. That's why we keep eggs over there, is to remind ourselves that people brought in things to exchange. So if it was made locally, they bartered for it. There were some subsequent trips to Charleston, a couple, and there were things shipped down regularly from Philadelphia by order, but he'd ordered them ahead of time and have them shipped. There were no other trips any place that we know of except a couple to Charleston.
Okay. And they were pretty successful with this endeavor.
Oh yes, for 25 years they were. I love this part. You always look at that and think that's a book, right? That's a book of the period.
Yeah.
It really is a book of the period. It looks pretty bad, right?
Yep.
The books he bought looked like that. That is a book newly made exactly as the old books were made then. Same sort of cowhide on the outside, same sort of paper, same sort of binding.
This is a hymn.
This is a hymnal.
Oh, it is.
The first
Or-
few pages
yeah.
are an exact copy of the hymnal that was used for 200 years in the Presbyterian Church. And I had a friend make that so you could see what it looked like. And he brought dozens and dozens of books.
Wow.
Religious books, Bibles, and a few novels to read along the way. So this was also the library.
As it relates to other stores historically in the state, what are some of the other ones that have been around? Maybe obviously not as long since this is the oldest standing one, but any other ones that are still standing and where they're located at?
Ones that date back to the early part of the 19th century, I don't know that any are still available to see.
Wow.
The mid-19th century, now you can start to get a variety of them. Even the S.W. Davis store down at the end of Old Huntersville Road dates to probably the end of the 19th century. So you get in that area, you can get a lot of them that are still here. The hardware store up in Mooresville is almost that old. The ones from before the Civil War, I don't know if there really are any others.
So this really goes to show how unique this place is. So as it relates to like local farmers and other businessmen that are now looking to move their products from like the bartering system and coming here, how did that look?
You mean how did the store work in the general idea of making cash crops sell?
Yeah, and utilizing local businesses versus having to go to Philadelphia or Charleston.
Well, as the stores got older, I mean, as it got from the 1805 to 1825, obviously, lots more happened down in Charlotte, and places that became Huntersville and Cornelius and Davidson. They weren't really towns yet, but they were becoming something. Where you would have somebody that would have a mill, they'd have a factory, they'd have a this, they'd have a that. Ironworks came here very strongly, so the iron things didn't have to be created so much anymore because there were ironworks here. Things that grew up around here, then you wouldn't have to import anymore. But you'd never get silver anywhere else, or glass, or some of those things. You'd have to always send for them.
Yeah.
The pottery over there, the red pottery, is local. So if people wanted simple pottery, they could get it here. But if you wanted fancy pottery like the white pottery, that had to come from England.
Now,
A lot of these after the war, too, came from England. You know, once the trade embargo was off, then we were back to trading with England, and people liked English goods.
and that stuff would flow through this store? Directly from England, or like as a comes through
Mostly
here
through
and then barter
Philadelphia or
again?
Charleston. They'd get it at the wholesale houses in Philadelphia and Charleston, and we'd get it from there.
So you have a list of the Davidsons there as far as their ledger, and they were a very prominent local family, so they would have traded and bought stuff here.
We have all the ledgers.
Well, that's what was going to be my question. How big of an impact did this little Torrance store have on the, let's say, North Mecklenburg area?
From McNitt Alexander over on 115 to John Davidson over at the edge of Beatty's Ford Road.
So they were
that's
trading with all the
entire
big
width
names of
this.
North Mecklenburg County.
It's the entire width of the county at that point.
And so as they started to build their wealth with the store and trading and selling and things like that, what did they do with that wealth? Did they become landowners? Did they farm?
Land. The money's in the land, folks. When he bought this, it was 667 acres that went with this little cabin. How's that for a deal? 600-foot cabin and 667 acres. He didn't do much with that for a while, partly because he wasn't here very often. When he got married, his wife brought with her not only 3 children, their child that they had in common, so 4 in total, but also the first domestic animals that were here, like cows and sheep and things like that they could keep, because someone was here to watch them then. He wasn't here enough to do it. A garden was planted. Things were done. Crops were started to be planted. So that's at about 1786 that happens. Now, in 1796, they build a house across the way. They don't live here anymore. They build a nice 2,000 square foot house next door instead of living in a 600 square foot cabin. And so that's where the parents are living by the time the son gets old enough to want a house of his own. That's why this one had to be expanded for the son to have a house. But the parents are living next door. In 1816, the parents die, and so the son lives over there. So he's actually living over there for the last several years of the store, and this only the part of this is open is the store that's open. There's the house.
So then what happened to the store? When was the last days of the store?
1825 it closed, and it closed because during all that period they acquired more and more and more land. Now the land was interesting how they got it. Some they bought from neighbors that were deciding to move on, say to Alabama where the land was free, or to Tennessee where the land was free. And that was true of a lot of children of all of these landowners. They went that way. So their land would get sold off in parts. The other thing they did was after the Revolution, if it was a loyalist land, it got confiscated by the state and sold to repair the state's finances, and they bought this loyalist land. Mm-hmm. So little by little they got more and more. At the end, by 1825, they had 3,000 acres. And all that time, cotton's coming on. Mm-hmm. Cotton gin's invented in 1793, I think it is, at least by Whitney's. They say there wasn't one before that, but that's when people knew about it. Took a while to get it to North Carolina, but by the early 1800s, it's here. You start to get your own cotton gin built. It now becomes worth doing. I got a little picture over here of cotton. Talk about cash crop. There's cotton growing. If you take this little tiny ball of cotton right there, and you ask somebody to take all that seed and junk out of there, it will take them an hour at least to pull that out of that one little piece of cotton to get it to look like this, and this is what comes out of it. Clearly, that is not cost effective. Cotton gin does it in a minute.
Oh, wow.
By the time you got the cotton gin, it's effective to grow cotton, pull this out, and sell cotton. So when the cotton gin gets here, it becomes cotton. The whole place gets planted in cotton, becomes sub-farms. You have overseers over little parts of it. Maybe 100 acres at a time you got people, or 300 acres at a time you got, that's one. People lived there. There were plenty of enslaved people out here by that time. I think at the maximum was 90-some.
Did they all take the last name of Torrance?
An awful lot of them did, and an awful lot of them stayed here. When we have reunions in June here, a lot of them come back.
Oh, wow.
Their descendants come back. Yeah. It's really nice to see that. Now, there are 3 Torrance families in the area, so you kind of have to get them all sorted out.
Yeah, yeah.
And each one of them changed the spelling of their name along the way, so the spelling doesn't help.
Related in some...
No.
No, okay. Well,
maybe back in Scotland, but we can't find any American common relation.
Okay.
Interesting.
So.
Wow. So the store closed down. Mm-hmm. The family moved into farming cotton, and a lot of cotton, it sounds like.
A lot of cotton. They were the biggest cotton plantation in the county.
The Torrance pot plantation was the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
And was that all done out of this property then, between this and the house next door?
Well, figure 3,000 acres around that house.
Wow.
Somebody once told me if you look at from 115 to Beatty's Ford Road, from exit 25 to exit 23, that's about 3,000 square acres, 3,000 acres. It isn't that 3,000 acres, but it's about that big.
Yeah, and cotton ran this area for a long time.
Yeah.
So that just basically takes their story into modern history, right?
It does, into the pre-Civil War era. After the Civil War, they had to break it up because there was no way that you could farm that much land with hired labor effectively. So they had to break it up into 9 subunits, and it was given to the 9 children of Richard Torrance. And the daughter named Delia got this part, and she married a man named Banks, and their son was Richard Banks, who's the one that restored all of this.
Oh, wow.
Now, we know that the basketball team is the Charlotte Hornets.
It is indeed.
Hornets nest.
And there's a hornet's nest on this, every sheriff's car and every police car.
Right. So tell us about this hornet's nest that is...
There was a hornet's nest, too, on the little historical placard that you have out there that the county gave, right?
It is. Yes. That designates it as a county historical site, yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. We are called the Hornets because you can either take the story that it was Tarleton, Lannister Tarleton, or that it was Lord Cornwallis himself, or both, that while they were here during the 1781 incursion, they got such resistance that they said, this is a hotbed of revolution. My God, it's like running into a bunch of hornets.
Boom.
Boom, we're the Hornets.
And that's all the Hornets lore here. Let's
It's like the swarm of hornets that everyone would have to run from here in Charlotte. So this is
That is a true hornet's nest that was taken out of one of the trees around here.
Really?
I think one in Atlanta, actually.
Okay.
Now, there is something called the Battle of the Bees, which is also true. Not natural hornets, but bees that you are using for honey. Mm-hmm. Down on McIntyre's farm, which is at the end of Bellies Ford Road, they were trying to forage for food, the British were, and they were invading McIntyre's farm. He was resisting them to some extent. But the big thing that they got some other militia to show up, I don't know, about 12 of them, I think, maybe as many as 20. But the big thing was some British idiot kicked over the bee nest, and the bees came out of the hives and swarmed all over the British and ran them off.
All right, so you got the Hornets battle. You got the battling the Hornets and battling the bees here.
Yes.
exactly.
Thanks once again for joining us on another episode of Hometown Chronicles USA. In the next episode, Sarah Sue and I will take a look into the addition where we believe the enslaved people who lived on the property would have stayed. We will also take a walk around the exterior of the building and see how it was built and what's inside these 250-plus-year-old walls. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and follow our channel for more videos just like this one. We can't wait to see you on the next episode of Hometown Chronicles USA.